It is almost midnight. A screen glows in a dark room, and the cursor blinks on a document that has barely one line. You know what you have to do. You have known for days. And yet, somehow, you have cleaned the kitchen, answered messages you ignored for weeks, and watched a video about a place you will never visit. Here is the strange part. None of it felt like rest. It felt like guilt with extra steps. And for most of your life, someone has told you what this means: that you are lazy, that you lack discipline, that you simply need to want it more. They were wrong. And the truth turns out to be far more interesting and far kinder than the story you have been handed. The word itself is a confession. Procrastination comes from Latin pro, meaning forward, and crastinus, meaning of tomorrow. To push the thing forward into tomorrow. The ancient Greeks had another word for the feeling behind it: akrasia, acting against your own better judgment, doing one thing while a quieter voice begs you to do another. So, this is not a modern sickness born of phones and notifications. People have been putting off tomorrow for thousands of years. Roman philosophers complained about it. So did generals and monks and kings. What is modern is the diagnosis we reach for. We have decided that procrastination is a time management problem. Buy the right planner, build the perfect morning routine, color code the calendar until the whole week glows. We have built a billion-dollar industry on that idea. And yet, if procrastination were really about managing time, then better tools would cure it. For most people, they do not. The planner fills up, and the task still sits there, untouched, glowing faintly with dread. About 1 in 5 adults are chronic procrastinators, not the merely busy, but people who delay in ways that quietly cost them. And almost everyone else does it sometimes. So either a fifth of humanity is broken, or we have been misreading the problem from the very start. Here is the shift that changes everything. Procrastination is not a time problem. It is an emotion problem. The psychologists Fushia Sirwas and Timothy Feichel put it simply: procrastination is a failure of mood repair. Watch it happen in slow motion. You sit down, you open the task, and something in your chest tightens just slightly. Maybe it is boredom. Maybe it is the fear that you will do it badly. Maybe you just do not know where to start. It is rarely the hardest tasks we run from. It is the ones that make us feel something unpleasant. The email that might get a cold reply. The form that reminds you of money. The project so big you cannot see its edges. The task carries an emotion, and the emotion stings. So, the mind does what minds do. It reaches for the fastest way to feel better right now. You check your phone, the tightness loosens, the dread lifts, relief floods in instantly, and that relief is a reward. Your brain, quietly, learns the lesson. When this feeling comes, escape. So procrastination is not you being lazy. It is you being human, choosing to feel better now and sending the bill to later. To see why that trade is so hard to refuse, we have to go inside the skull. Picture two forces that do not always agree. One is the prefrontal cortex, just behind your forehead. The planner, the part that thinks about goals, consequences, and next week. The other is the limbic system, older and deeper. Fast, emotional, interested in one thing only: how you feel now. When a task feels threatening, the emotional brain reacts before the planner has even sat down. In 2018, Researchers at the Ruhr University in Bochum slid 264 people into an MRI scanner to go looking for procrastination itself. And they found something remarkable. The people who struggled most to act had a larger amygdala, the brain's alarm bell for fear and threat. And the link between that alarm and the region that helps calm it down was weaker. Think of the amygdala as a smoke detector. In some brains, it is simply more sensitive, and the wire that switches it off is thinner. So the alarm rings louder and it rings for longer. In plain terms, these were not people weaker in will. They were people louder in feeling. And that is not an excuse. It is an explanation. And the two are very different things. There is also a simple, almost mathematical reason that tomorrow keeps winning. The psychologist Piers Steele reviewed hundreds of studies and distilled procrastination into something close to an equation. Your motivation to do a thing rises with two forces: how much you expect to succeed and how much you value the reward. And it falls with two others: how impulsive you are in the moment and how far away that reward sits in time. That last one is the trap. Psychologists call it present bias. A reward today feels enormous. The exact same reward next month feels like a rumor. It is the same reason a gym membership feels powerful in January and impossible by February. So, a deadline 3 weeks away barely registers, while the small comfort right in front of you feels urgent and real. It is why everything changes the night before. Suddenly, the deadline is now. The value snaps into focus, the distance collapses to nothing, and motivation comes roaring back, right at the edge of disaster. You were never incapable. The reward was simply too far away to feel real. But that midnight rescue comes at a price, and the price compounds. Every time you escape the task, you get relief. And every time, the task grows a little heavier, now carrying guilt on top of the original dread. So, the next time you face it, it feels worse, which makes escaping even more tempting. This is the procrastination loop: short-term relief, bought with long-term stress, over and over. And chronic procrastination has been linked not only to worse work, but to more anxiety and even poorer physical health. The person who pays that bill is always the same person: your future self. And here is the quietly tragic part. When we imagine our future self, studies suggest the brain treats that person almost like a stranger. Tomorrow, you does not feel entirely real. So we hand them the debt, the way you might cheerfully volunteer someone else for a chore. Procrastination, in the end, is partly a failure to feel that the future is still you. So the obvious answer would be to just try harder, to grit your teeth and force it. For decades, that was the entire advice. Willpower, like a muscle. Just want it more. But look at what we have just learned, and you can see why that fails. You cannot force your way out of a feeling. Pressure is just more of the feeling you were already running from. And shame is worse still. Telling a frightened, overwhelmed brain that it is lazy and weak does not calm the alarm. It makes it scream. The harder you push a frightened animal, the more it freezes. This is the cruel design of the whole thing. The standard cure, discipline through self-criticism, is made of the exact ingredient that causes the problem: more bad feeling. So, if willpower and shame are the wrong tools, what are the right ones? If procrastination is an emotion problem, then the solutions all work on the emotion, not the clock. The first is to make the task smaller, absurdly smaller. Not write the report, but open the document and write one ugly sentence. A smaller task carries a smaller emotion, and a smaller emotion is one you can actually face. The second comes straight from that alarm bell in your brain. In a landmark study, people who simply named what they were feeling showed less activity in the amygdala. Putting a feeling into words, it turns out, quiets the very alarm that drives you to escape. So when the flinch comes, name it. Oh, this makes me anxious. That one honest sentence does real work in the brain. The third is to decide in advance. Psychologists call them if then plans. Instead of, I will do it later, you say, when I finish lunch, I will write for 10 minutes at my desk. You link the action to a moment so your future self does not have to win the argument all over again. These simple plans are among the most reliable tools we have for getting started. And then the finding that surprises almost everyone. In 2010, a study followed students across their exams. Those who forgave themselves for procrastinating before one exam went on to procrastinate less before the next. Not the ones who scolded themselves hardest, the ones who let it go. Because if the problem is bad feeling, then guilt is fuel, and self forgiveness is what finally empties the tank. In my opinion, this is where the old story does real harm. Calling procrastination laziness is not just inaccurate, it prescribes exactly the wrong medicine. It tells an already anxious person to add shame, the single ingredient most likely to make an emotional problem worse. I think we would get further and suffer far less if we treated procrastination as a signal rather than a sin, a sign that a task needs to be made smaller or a feeling needs to be faced, not a verdict on who you are. That does not mean deadlines stop mattering or that discipline is a myth. It means discipline grows better in kindness than in contempt. So let us go back to that dark room, just before midnight. The cursor still blinking, the single line still alone on the page. Only now you know what is really happening there. That is not laziness in the chair. It is a brain doing something very old, flinching from a feeling and reaching for relief. The alarm is loud, the reward is far away, and tomorrow you still feels like a stranger. None of that makes you broken. It makes you a person with a completely normal brain, facing a completely normal fear. And the way out was never to hate yourself harder. It is to make the tasks smaller, to name the feeling, and to forgive the last time it beat you. And to remember that the future self you keep postponing is just you, waiting. Maybe the first kind thing you can do for that person is to write one ugly sentence tonight, not the whole report. Just one line. Badly. It turns out that is how almost everything difficult has ever begun. The screen is still glowing, but the room feels a little less heavy now. And tomorrow, when it comes, might finally belong to you.